Welcome to About You. I'm Connie Hogan. Well, it's not every day that I get to interview somebody who shares a somewhat similar background, professional background to me, in that we both worked for Ford and GM, different time and place, but we have just discovered we even worked on some of the same projects, know a lot of the same people. So it's really an interesting conversation today. In any case, Renee Lerche is now running her own firm, her consulting firm called RS Lerche Associates, which specializes in talent management and talent retention. In addition to her automotive creds, she also has a lot of experience in the insurance business. Renee, we can't wait to hear all of your amazing career.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome.
Because I really did get a chance to review my career,
and what a career it is. I mean,
yeah.
You have a Harvard. I usually like to start out with like, the college and where you were, and you were from New York City,
right,
which we all love. And then you were at Harvard, but start from the beginning.
Okay. So I should start with the influence my father had on me. My father was a union organizer, a very deep social conscience, in fact, he was born in Europe. So I'm first generation American, and very committed to the dignity of work, the dignity of workers, and always kept telling me you have to have a purpose. You know, from the time I was a little girl. I didn't get to hear fairy tales. He actually read Das Kapital to me.
That's funny.
So,
and it all paid off.
Right, it all paid off.
Paid off. Forget those fairy tales.
Right. So from that, and then personally, I always had this obsession with how people learn things, not only academic things, but how they learn to, function effectively in society and advance in whatever their society was, right? Because I was as interested in societies in Africa, and it's not on my resume, but I actually have a master's in African social systems.
You have, how many total degrees do you have?
Well, I don't know. Right.
But so Harvard kind of stands
Harvard
out.
is, yes.
That stands out, and Michigan, right?
Right. Well, Michigan I taught at.
Oh, taught, right.
Right. So, but yes, so it was always for me very, I was just obsessed with how do people learn.
That's interesting.
And so bringing those social conscience, how do people learn? So I went to Douglas College undergraduate. Douglas was the women's college to Rutgers University. It doesn't exist as a separate women's college any longer, but it was when I was there. And there, I majored in sociology and theater. I actually was an acting major.
Oh, wow.
And so, which, by the way, I would say was probably one of the best backgrounds I could have had.
I've heard that with people.
Right, totally, because I'm never nervous. I'm actually a pretty shy person. And I was never nervous in front of groups of people because I just go into role. So
that helps.
Right. Plus, theater and sociology was a focus on how do people interact with each other. Right? So theater exposes those kind of interactions. And so again, it was all focused on, all right, I really am interested in how people learn. So I knew I was going to follow a path about learning, education. And I would say that I'm an educator. If you finally put everything away, I'm an educator.
Okay.
So from my undergraduate, I went to actually Boston University Graduate School, dropped for a doctorate, dropped out of it, and then spent time getting involved in the community education efforts that were going on, which were essentially, even though I had no connection to Michigan at that time, were funded by Mott Foundation out of Flint.
Oh, okay. Oh, my goodness.
Around the country. And I became a principal of a community school, the M.E. Fitzgerald. It was an elementary, but it was a community school.
Was that in
Cambridge.
Cambridge, okay.
Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I think I would say it was the most responsible position I've ever held.
I would believe that. I would believe
right,
that,
because I was responsible for those kids in loco parentis, right? And it was it was a difficult time. The neighborhood, the M.E. Fitzgerald was Tip O'Neill's neighborhood.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was starting to really learn about the power of politics and the power of public policy. I became the president of the Massachusetts Community Education Association.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was the first, not the first, but second woman president in the country.
Wow.
Because actually, Massachusetts, the president before me was a woman too. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
but I started to really, and we would lobby in the governor, we would, you know, and I really started to get interested in policy.
That's intoxicating. And
right,
it
right.
really is, because when I was in that, it was really, yeah.
Right, and so in order to do my job as a principal more effectively, I got a master's in education administration from what is now University of Massachusetts. At the time, it was Boston State College, but it is UMass now.
UMass, okay.
And that really helped. But I also knew that I wanted to affect public policy, not just in the state, but also nationally. So I then applied to doctoral programs, and Harvard, Stanford, U of M. Not Michigan, Massachusetts, University of Massachusetts. I got into Harvard and Stanford, not Massachusetts. So
Isn't that funny?
it is funny. It is funny, but of course, you know, I always wanted to go to Harvard, so I ended up going to Harvard, and I did my doctorate there, became president of the Graduate Student Association.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And sort of then really did it in social policy analysis. Only Harvard would have a degree in social policy analysis, focused on adult education, adult learning, and development. So that was how I saw myself as a public policy person. And then my first job postdoctoral was with Mrs. Bush, Barbara Bush.
Oh, wow.
Running the National Adult Literacy Project, which I actually helped, I designed and led, but I never did anything. I should say this right up front. All of the wonderful things I got to do, and I never did them alone. I was one of the people who really liked working in a team with a group, because I felt I got better. You know, they gave me better ideas than I had on my own. So, but the National Adult Literacy Project, I led, and I designed with my team.
Wow. In Washington, I assume.
Well, it was national.
Okay.
So I would spend my week in Washington, then come back to Cambridge on the weekends.
Okay, so you weren't living in Washington.
No, I never did live in Washington, although I always thought I'd end up there.
That's how I was, because I was with Jim and the lobbying and all that, and we were back and forth. Every time I see Reagan National Airport, it wasn't even called Reagan National Airport. And it's like how many times I would fly in there. I loved it, but it's like I felt like I lived in Washington.
Right, because I was a lobbyist for the auto. I had to register as a lobbyist.
Exactly.
So yeah, and Mrs. Bush was amazing.
Yeah,
Barbara Bush was amazing. I learned so much
like a
from
nice,
her.
down-to-earth person, yeah.
She was tough as nails.
Yeah, she seemed, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, I actually got to work with both her and Hillary Clinton on a different project with Hillary.
They didn't like each other. I know that. I always heard that. Yeah.
Well, they projected absolutely the opposite of what they were. I would have said
I would believe
Hillary was actually very sensitive, really smart. And so, like, she could work at a level. She could work for days without taking a break.
She's so smart. And
right.
I'm not in her political agenda, but I do say she's smart.
Right. And it was just like, but she would just be so focused and so intense that even I, who was very intense, had to take a break.
Oh, wow.
And Mrs. Bush was tough as nails.
Yeah.
Steely spine, right?
That's what I
but just so funny as all get out, and just taught me so much. I mean, she's one of the people I look to, and I got to introduce my mother to her, and you know.
That's so fun.
Yeah. So, but running the National Adult Literacy Project was just wonderful, because I got to travel all over the country. I got to travel internationally, and we focused on changing legislation so that there could be more sources of literacy training and education available, and specifically to disadvantaged populations. And so we got to do that. I got to help design exemplary programs, wrote a book about it.
The bottom line is
The Bottom Line Basic Skills in the Workforce.
So that's your book, yeah.
Yeah, it was edited, but from the report which I wrote. So, but again, with my team, yeah.
So then we'll move on from all of, so that was early on. So
Yes,
that
that's my public policy background.
Public policy. And then you were kind of recruited, you were telling me earlier, by GM and IBM.
Yeah, at the same time.
At the same time, and I was kind of, not IBM, but GM, at the same time. And what we have to talk about, and we'll go back to how you got into it, but I didn't mention this before, I knew about Explore the Possibilities because I used to do the philanthropic report for GM, and I would just gather everything.
Oh, see,
to write
here's
that
the
up.
connection we didn't know.
Right, that was the one I saw, and I meant to mention it, but we were talking about everything else in the world.
Right.
But yeah, that was so interesting because we had so many. That was the GM legal staff.
Yes.
That did that, or they took credit for it anyway.
Well,
so.
no, it Explore the Possibilities was actually done under labor relations.
Okay, that's
Al
so
Warren,
interesting.
Al Warren
so
and Larry Vicker, labor and employer relations were the two, but it was Al Warren's baby.
Okay, and then I was right after that because I think he was gone by the time I got there. But yeah, so I would write that up, and we had so many different things. But that was always easy because it was such a good program.
It was a great
program. We would have pictures. I think I had
of
pictures
the kids.
Exactly. It was
and of the characters.
Great photo ops for that.
Right. And we had Lenny who was the investigator, and it was really innovative at the time.
It was.
And we won awards for it. I don't remember which awards.
Well, I know at one point, now this is coming back to me, I think it was featured on like Good Morning America
Yes,
or something.
it was. Yes,
and
it was.
They had the different people. If it was was her name Diane Sawyer or somebody might have been doing the interview.
She also did an interview.
Yeah, I remember that.
And because we did it all over the country. And the goal of Explore the Possibilities was to attract young people into careers in skilled trades and engineering.
Right.
It did come out of the EEOC settlement against all the autos. This was GM's response. But it was really a great program, a lot of fun to work on. And that was actually my first big program in automotive.
That's so funny. That's a great introduction to it because that's kind of starting at the top and working backwards, right?
Right. I love,
great.
we'd go out to the plant because we had to like talk to skilled tradespeople and engineers, and we'd go out to the plants. And it was for me, who was new
that
at
had to be a
GM.
good,
It was
GM's
great.
so big, because I was an auditor way back. I won't even talk about that. But I would get to go to all those. I was in Rochester, I told you, New York, Buffalo, and my whole funny thing about Buffalo and Rochester was it snowed in January.
All the time.
It never stopped. It was like when I was there, it might be little flurries, but it made Detroit look like Florida. You know, we said that.
Every time I'd have to go out to Buffalo, I'd get snowed in. We'd have to drive back.
You did.
Right? We'd have to drive back.
That's what we would do.
Right?
And drive around. Oh my God.
God, it was crazy.
Well, I mean, just that I feel like it was hazardous duty, you know.
Right.
Totally. So then you were with GM in 2 years, and then you were recruited to Ford. And Pete Pastillo, we were talking about. Some of those funny little anecdotes.
Right. So Pete Pastillo at the time was Vice President of Employee Relations, which included labor relations. And although people wouldn't necessarily want to publicize this, although they found out later. Steve Jokic, who was vice president at Ford for UAW and then president of the UAW, were really close friends. So I actually had worked with both of them in Washington on the literacy.
See what a small, good old boys or good old girls. Good old boys and girls club, right? We all know that, right?
Right. Well, as you and I discussed, the automotive world here is very small.
Small world. Oh my. Well, look at us. I mean, this is so crazy. We know all these people and did the same jobs.
Right.
And then Brad Simmons, rest in peace, when you look, I think I told you this before, when you looked at his resume, he and I had the exact same jobs in Ford and GM. But anyway, get back to your interview.
Well, but it's such an interesting world.
And then you knew Brad.
Yes, of course I knew Brad. We worked together a lot because a lot of what I did, both at GM and Ford, was external facing.
Right, and me too. Good point.
Right. Yeah. So after I had done Explore the Possibilities, and I had been at GM, I think about 2 years at that point, and I knew I'd kind of like run out of things to do. I was like at too low a level to do the kind of stuff I love to do because my background was in large-scale projects.
Right,
That's
exactly.
strategic large-scale projects.
Yeah.
So, and I was friends with Pete Bastillo. I'd been working with Pete and Steve Jokic on the Employability Skills Task Force, which was set up by Governor Blanchard. Lee Iacocca was the official chair. They were the working chairs. And I told Pete, I think I'm going to leave GM and I'll probably just go back to Cambridge. And he said, maybe not.
See, that's how things happen.
Maybe not. Now you're going to have to do, at the time there was no poaching between companies, which is no longer true,
Right,
of
it
course.
wasn't when
But so I did a consultancy for like 3 or 4 months with one of their training providers and then got brought into
Ford Motor Company.
Yeah, brought into Ford Motor Company. But I came in at the time at the private salary role level, which is right below executive role, or now they're, level 3, 4, whatever. But so it would have been level 3, I guess, which was high enough. And I was on the employee relations staff, but I was also doing external education for Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
So, like even though I was involved in the negotiations, I was always the one, as Pete Bastillo described it, who helped design the bow on the contract. So that's where you're going to see the UAW Ford Family Service Centers came out of that, and basic skills, BSEP. I can't even remember what the E was, employee program, what came out of that. So I got to do those kind of initiatives, but and then I kept getting jobs that nobody had had before.
You said that, and large innovative things.
Yes. So because they would say, okay, now you're going to do this, you title the job. So lucky for me, I got to be senior executive role, which is, like I was the 6th woman in the company's history.
Wow.
To make senior executive role.
So I'm sure we'll have to talk offline about different people we knew there.
Right.
In that role, yeah.
Right. So, and I was responsible for consolidating education, training, and development globally for Ford.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big job.
Right.
It's a lot of
It didn't exist before, right? They were all separate because we were globalizing at the time. But it was like, so I had to convince senior executives like Bob Rui, who was head of sales and marketing at the time, that they really wanted a consolidated education training function. They didn't want to have to just do their own because they could get so many more resources if we consolidated it. So that was great fun.
Oh, I bet. And there's nothing better than being in a big company where you have autonomy, you have the support of the top dudes.
Yes,
and
which you need.
You got to have that.
If you don't,
you're toast if you don't have that.
Right. If you want to really do something innovative and large scale, you better be right at the top. So Pete was top enough, but I also had Mr. Poling and then Alex Trotman and Don Peterson. Mr. Peterson was actually.
Did you know that he just passed away?
No, but
just like last week, I think.
Oh well, I hadn't heard that.
So,
yeah.
So yeah.
But so, conveniently, I was able to work. I probably was closest to Mr. Poling.
Oh right. Yeah.
Yeah, because he was the one who actually promoted me. But like they really gave me a lot of latitude.
Awesome.
To do. Pete would describe it as you can make this company. You can move this company to do big things that it never thought it would be involved in.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so
those programs are so important with the UAW and
I was able to work very well with the UAW, and not only Steve Jokic, but Ron Gettelfinger, and
Gettelfinger.
So,
that's another name I've heard.
Yeah. Well, and so we were able to do some pretty impressive things. But so coming out of that era, the Henry Ford Academy.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
So Pete called me up to his office one day, and we talked about the intercom system, which I'm sure no longer exists, although it was very convenient.
Now you
at
get a
the
text.
Yeah,
Get
right,
up here.
right. Get up here. And I went up there, and he said, you know, Governor Engler wants to do like another Thomas Edison Institute. Just do a program. You know, we want to make nice with the governor because he's going to give us breaks on taxes.
Oh, of
That's
course,
really what it was
100%.
about,
Yeah,
tax
it's all-
abatements. Yeah, tax
all about
abatements.
the-
Right. So you really just need to go. And I think you should work with Steve Hamp, who at the time was head of the Henry Ford Museum, now the Henry Ford.
And is the son-in-law of the Fords.
Yes, yes. Married to Sheila Ford
Sheila,
Hamp,
yeah.
who, you know, it was like so interesting because I knew Sheila back then, and now it's the Lions, and I see her at the Lions.
She's the
like
girl now,
She's the,
right?
right, the
Go
it
girl.
girl, right. So, but anyway, and he said, go over and see Steve and just come up with something. So Steve and I have lunch. We meet, and I really connected with him.
That's awesome. Oh, wow.
And he was wanting to do something really innovative to move the museum, you know, like into more current at the time. And so I said, well, instead of just doing a program, let's do charter schools had emerged. I said, why don't we do a charter high school? And he said, yeah, that would be great. And we put it on the grounds of the Henry Ford, and we used the artifacts. So kids would be actually working with real artifacts that would really engage them. And as a charter school, it's totally open. So we were, depending on where you were accredited, we were accredited with Wayne Intermediate School District. So any kid from Wayne County could apply, who was age eligible and grade eligible, could apply, and which meant we would also have a lot of Detroit kids who turned out to be way behind. We'd also have Northville. What, you know.
Oh, so what a diverse group, right?
Totally. We had some kids who are reading grade 2, entering 9th grade.
Oh, wow. You hear those stories. I mean,
You know, and so we had to set, there were all kinds of things we had to do, but the first thing was to get the union on board, the UAW, because, and the MEA, of course, but nobody was going forward at Ford unless the union would, the UAW would agree we could do this. Now remember, these were not unionized teachers. This was not coming out of the MEA.
Oh, wow.
This was coming at, the union did not like charter schools.
I was going to say.
Because at the time, they thought that who's teaching in these schools? How are they certified? The schools are no-go. A lot of them were religious based, and so we worked with the union. I remember a lot of sit-downs over at Solidarity House, when there was Solidarity House, and they came on board and said, we'll support it. We're going to support this because you're going to open it to all these kids. Our members can apply who live in Wayne County.
So how did they do was there stiff requirements for the kids, or how?
No, you can't do stiff. Charters are open. I don't know if they still are, but it's by lottery. It's by lottery.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah,
right, it's by lottery. So
it really gets a diverse group.
Right. So the parent, now you have to get kids who have parents who are interested enough, or involved, not interested, I know parents are interested, but involved enough or able enough to put their kids' names in the lottery.
Right.
And then once a child was chosen, we would take siblings as they came along.
Oh, really?
But we started with the 9th grade, and we built it on the floor of the museum.
Oh,
so they were part of the exhibition. So we, you know, like when I think about how innovative the school was, it's now, I think I mentioned to you, I'm now going to either, she's retiring after 26 years or 28 years. The principal I hired.
Now it's still working, right?
Yep.
It's still in
oh my God, yes.
Going strong.
Oh yeah. In fact, there are multiple versions because we built it as a replicable model.
Okay.
That was the goal.
But in Michigan, Detroit, that's the only one that it is.
Well, Center for Creative Studies got involved. I think they have one, a version of it. I know we did one in New Orleans. So I'm lost kind of track, except I will be at Cora's retirement party, so I'll catch up.
Because I was talking about you in the interview, right?
Right.
So, that's so funny. How exciting that is. That's so fun to have. You know, it's not always people across the board in GM, Ford, and Chrysler that we have something that you have to really look to that's unique, that you would have that, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of an accomplishment.
Oh, yeah,
That's
and it's a
unique
living accomplishment.
And
you know?
it's going on, yeah.
Yeah, and so over time, you know, there were things that made it go more mainstream, like the universities, like what Michigan would accept as a transcript and
I see.
that kind of thing, but
Really,
very
yeah.
proud of the Henry Ford Academy and all it's accomplished way beyond my
Yeah,
involvement in
yeah.
it, starting it. So, and we also did the UAW Ford Family Service Centers, which
Yes.
no longer exist.
Okay.
When the company was struggling, of course, it has to get rid of all that. But the UAW Ford Family Services Center was also really innovative, featured on the news, national
I know
news.
I've heard basic things.
Yeah, and we did early childhood programs right at this. It was built. They were real buildings. Thank you, Ron Gettelfinger, because when I was thinking about it,
Because he's from the Ford plant in Louisville, right?
right,
That's where he
right.
was from,
Well, of
yeah.
course, we had one there, but we, you know,
Oh,
any
oh, did you?
plant
Okay.
over 3,000 people. Yeah.
No kidding.
So,
Okay.
but it was like when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about it as like a virtual, you know, because who's going to build buildings? That's a very expensive proposition. And Ron, when I was first pitching it to Ron Gettelfinger in those negotiations, I think that was, it's going to age like 1990, one of those negotiations there. And he was tough, you know.
Oh, yeah,
he
he was.
Very tough.
He was, I could
and
tell
so they, of
that,
course,
yeah.
sent me in and said, he's going to eat her alive. You know, wait till he hears it.
He didn't know
and
what he was dealing
like,
with.
right, no, he, you know, he said, okay, all right. So talk to me about it. So I can see our like retirees going in and having coffee. There'll be a place, there'll be a fireplace, and it was like suddenly a real building.
Wow,
And that
that's
was
amazing.
And we built those buildings. Now we then sold those buildings, but we had we had Bright Horizons providing early childhood, like from 6 weeks on. We had after-school programs. We had elderly care referral.
Wow.
We had summer camps. I mean, it was really quite impressive, but particularly the nursery, preschool,
that would be the
that
most,
that freed our employees. I mean, we were able to justify it on like, look, there's absenteeism. We're having this big absenteeism problem because parents, their kid gets sick, they have to stay home. So, or they have no childcare.
Wow.
And this will allow people to work. And it did. And we also had like healthcare, nurses
Oh,
on
wow.
staff. So yeah, it was just unfortunately economics
See?
sort of put an end to it, but it was still really
A great accomplishment.
a great accomplishment
Well,
to
this
get it
is
done.
a great segue because if you can believe we're running out of time.
Oh.
We have to come back and we'll bookmark getting into your other career.
Right, my insurance career.
But this is so interesting though. I wanted to spend time on this because what you do with Ford I think is probably I mean, it's the most relevant around here, you know, or the most interesting, not relevant, but interesting. It is to me, and I think it is to our audience. So,
well, right. And,
it is,
and when I
'cause
get
you
to
have so
Kaufman
much.
Financial Group and the Kaufman Institute.
Oh, we'll do that second.
Right.
We will. I mean, seriously, because I mean, it's so good. But Renee, good luck with whatever you continue to do. I know you're kind of in transition now.
Yes.
But you do have the RS
Lerche Associates.
But we will bookmark this and we will come back. And I know whatever you do is going to be fabulous.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee.
And this was great fun. And
It was great fun,
reminiscing.
Absolutely. We have so much, and we haven't touched the surface.
Right.
Skimmed the surface of all we could talk about. And thank you for watching, and thanks for tuning in to About You.